Chapter 5, Getting Ahead, Inquest number 332. Judge, we have an inquest off Sand Flat Road at Skelly Camp. East Texas produces much of the oil that literally drives our country. In 1931, the area produced 1 million barrels of oil a day. Many of the wells continue to produce. In Sand Flat, miles and miles of blacktop or oil sand roads wind through the woods and across pastures from oil well to oil well. Skelly Camp is one of those oil producers. The roads are private and often reluctantly shared between oil men and landowners. A gate or cattle guard controls the people and animals that come and go. Often gates are left open or there's no gate, and people enter ignoring the red letters that read, "Do not trespass." Property owners find kids exploring, lovers parking, alcoholics drinking, workers eating, campers camping, parties with bonfires blazing, hunters hunting, oil field workers working, and even swimmers skinny dipping. Sometimes they find dead bodies, a car with a driver sitting behind the wheel with a bullet hole in his head, or one or more dead kids around a natural gas valve, a shallow grave, or a body lying in the brush. These roads provide an illegal dumping ground for old beds and furniture, trash, and bodies. This body was discovered when Bill Johnson, the property owner, checked out a dump site. Something did not seem right with the mattress and box springs. I drive by an oil well, the tall galvanized skeleton derrick long gone. The oil well motor is powered by natural gas. The loud internal combustion motor varies in sound and rhythm as it makes its cycle of strain and release, strain and release. The huge black head of the steel rocking horse goes up and down, thrusting the pump rod into the earth and sucking out the black gold. The massive counterbalance goes round and round at the horse's tail. I think about high school days, and the night I showed an oil well to an exchange student from Sweden. "I noticed something stinking to high heaven," says Mr. Johnson, thumbs resting in the sides of his worn denim overall. "I figured someone had dumped a dead dog or skinned out a deer or gutted a hog and left me with the guts." There's a definite odor. We begin walking around the body and the bedding, trying to find a breathable place to stand. It's like walking around an invisible campfire. The smell seems to follow us like invisible smoke. "I turned over the box springs." He paused for a moment, putting what he saw and the putrefied smell together. "Hot damn maggots was churning. I could see arms and legs and shoes. I knew it was human." He starts to take a deep breath to continue, but decides not to. "Hell, I threw up and called 911." It can be pretty rough, I say, waiting to see if he will continue to talk or throw up again. "Do you have any idea how long the body might have been there?" His hands leave his side and go to his knees. Bent over, he shakes his head. "Man, I don't see how you do this. I don't ever be able to eat another bowl of rice again." "Why don't you go sit in your truck and turn on the air conditioner? We'll call you if we need anything else." He gratefully looks at me and continues. "I'm not sure. This bed stuff's been here a long time." He points to the illegal dump. "I used to clean this mess up, but they just junk it up again. If there's a pile, they'll add to it and at least keep it one place. When they see me, they skedaddle. I'll catch 'em one of these days." "You might be lucky you didn't catch this one," I say. "That's a full-size bed. It would cover two bodies as easy as one." "You think he is murdered?" he asked. "Well, he wasn't out here taking a nap." The box springs are covered with a light brown coarse material and a flower print. A dark stain burnt into the fabric looks like the shadow of a human. It's now basting in the summer sun. The body, matching the shadow, is lying next to it. I examine the body that's been there at least 2 or 3 weeks. A trip of 120 miles to the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Science in Dallas will narrow the timeline. There are the bug people. forensic etymologists. They can look at the age of maggots and beetles and the hollow shells of insect generations to pin down how long the body has been there. Judge, we can't find any ID, says Detective Smith. Life for me and death for others would be so much easier if everyone had some kind of identification or label attached permanently to their bodies, with a name and next of kin. A tattoo sometimes is helpful, except that people rarely tattoo their own name on their bodies. A tattoo would not have helped much in this case. The forensic center may help by identification. Dental x-rays, x-rays of bones, fingerprints, and a closer inspection for scars and tattoos are the usual methods. Spelled DEOXYRIBONUCLEIC, acid, we all call it DNA, is a wonderful tool if you have a suspect or someone whom you can connect the genetic fingerprint. Without a comparison, its value is greatly reduced. As for fingerprints, the tough hides of the finger last longer than the skin covering most of the rest of the body. Because the skin is loose during decomposition, the flesh cleaves from the bone and the fingerprints can be slipped off the hand for examination. Another method used for possible identification is to strip the skull and jaw of the soft tissues. Ants and animals do this in nature, leaving evidence used to determine how long the body's been lying there. A nice large cooking pot works in the laboratory. Forensic facial reconstruction, or forensic facial approximation, uses clay on the skull to create a face based on the amalgamation of artistry, heavy on the art. Some creative busts look very good. Unfortunately, some do not look much like the original. Crime scene investigators continue to take pictures. The body is placed piece by piece into a thick plastic body bag, which is zipped from head to toe. I'm headed for Winona. Mr. Doe is going to Dallas. Later, we have spaghetti with meat sauce for supper. 2 weeks later, I receive a call from Detective Smith with an update on the case. We have a name for Mr. Doe, Philip Brinkman. Apparently, he has a gambling debt that was settled in the oil field. We have a suspect. He's charged with murder. Mr. Brinkman moved here from the state of Maine. Next of kin has been notified. 2 days later, I receive a call from Miss Brinkman. They will not release Philip until you tell them, she says. I fax the order to Dallas and release the body to a funeral home in Dexter, Maine. 2 days later, I receive a call from Miss Brinkman. They will not release Philip until you tell them, she says. I fax the order to Dallas to release the body to a funeral home in Dexter, Maine for burial in a cemetery near Lake Wasuki. As far as I'm concerned, the case is closed. 3 months later, I receive a letter from an attorney from Dexter, Maine. It reads in part, "This is to inform you that the body of Mr. Brinkman was buried, the grave closed, and the headstone set. It has come to our attention that the head of Mr. Brinkman did not arrive with the body. It is the desire of my client that the head be interred with the body. The ground is frozen at present and will cause additional expenses. An alternative is to wait until the spring thaw. I need to know the whereabouts of Mr. Brinkman's head, and if a lawsuit is necessary, who will be the responsible party." I call the Smith County Sheriff. "Detective, where is Mr. Brinkman's head?" I know that the recreation of Betty Bones is sitting on a bookshelf behind his desk. I hope, or maybe not, that Mr. Brinkman is keeping her company. "Not here, Judge. We didn't get anything but stinky clothing from Dallas." I make another call. "Southwest Medical Examiners," the operator says. "This is Judge Shamburger from Smith County." "Yes, Judge, what can we do for you?" "You did an autopsy on Mr. Brinkman?" "Let me pull it up." Computer keys tap in the background. "Yes, sir. We sent the preliminary gunshot wound to the head. Do we need to send it again?" "I'm looking for Mr. Brinkman's head." Silence follows for a few seconds. His body was released to Dexter Funeral Home, the woman says confidently. I know he's buried in Maine, but they tell me he was buried without his head. Do you have it there? Silence, longer this time. Please hold. Another voice comes on the line. This is Dr. Hartman. I understand you're looking for Mr. Brinkman? Well, part of Mr. Brinkman, his head to be more exact. We're going to do a forensic reconstruction on him. I suppose he's reading the file. That did not happen. You sent them a body. I hope it was Mr. Brinkman. Oh, yes, I see the release. One moment. Another long pause. A click. And a new voice. Judge Shamburger, this is Gerald Jessup, an attorney for the Forensic Center. I understand you're looking for Mr. Brinkman's head? That is correct. Well, the good news is we have it here. We have the skull. That may or may not be good news, I reply. Whenever someone says good news, chances are it will be followed by bad news. We're going to release the skull to your investigator in the district attorney's office. He wants to use it for evidence. Evidence, I ask? Does he plan to exhibit the victim's skull to the jury? A call to the district attorney reveals just that. Now imagine the impossible. Somehow, you are accused of Mr. Brinkman's murder, of which you are totally innocent. You've been indicted by a grand jury because the district attorney told them you did it. You feel confident because there's no real evidence presented to the jury to link you to the crime. In final argument, your attorney says, there is no evidence, my client is not guilty. The prosecutor points out and points to, you, the defendant, cannot explain your whereabouts on the day of the murder. It happened 6 years ago. The defendant admits to having the same interest as Mr. Brinkman. You like to play cards and bingo. The difference is Mr. Brinkman bet heavy on his interest. We're in this courtroom for one reason, because you, he says, pointing at you, took Mr. Brinkman into the woods. His eyes focus on you as he walks over to the evidence table. He turns and picks up Mr. Brinkman's skull, and as he walks back towards the jury, he says, where you murdered Mr. Brinkman. He pauses for dramatic effect. This skull once belonged to a breathing, living human being, Mr. Brinkman. He walks back and forth, individually looking at every person in the jury box, and then looking at the skull. He holds it in his hand. He holds the skull from behind at the base like a hand puppet, and he moves it so it appears to be looking back and forth. There are two distinct holes on one side of the temple area, each the size of a dime. On the other side is the hole the size of a small coffee cup. This skull is the only voice left for Mr. Brinkman. He cries for justice. You notice 3 holes. He turns the skull as though it's looking at them, and then turns it to look at you, the accused. They show the violent act of a point-blank gunshot wound done by the defendant's own hands. Now the jury, the prosecutor, and the empty-eyed skull of Mr. Brinkman are all looking at you. These 2 holes are where the bullets entered. He turns the skull to face him, as though he is now facing Mr. Brinkman eye to eye. He lowers the skull so that each jury member can peer into the skull through the entry wounds and out through the larger exit wound. He aims the skull so the jury looks through the holes like a telescope. Each of them will see you, the accused murderer, on the other side. Each trial begins with the presumption of innocence. We all want to believe that law enforcement, prosecutors, and courts are all doing the right thing. We assume they all know what they're doing and strive for justice. And I believe they do. Justice and fairness are 2 different things. Fairness is a gray area in the eye of the beholder. What is fair to you may not be fair to me. Justice is more black and white. or black or white, guilty or not guilty. It deals in law, which may or may not be fair. Whether it's a traffic ticket or a murder, the burden of proof is the same, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury is admonished, if you have a reasonable doubt, you will find by your verdict not guilty. Still, I've had jury after jury say they weren't quite sure about this or that, but we unanimously found them guilty. I find disturbing two common sayings that make their way around the criminal justice system. The first is that a good prosecutor can convict a guilty person. A really good prosecutor can convict an innocent person. You may think it absurd to find yourself in the position of being mistakenly charged with murder or anything else. Which brings us to the second saying, you can indict a ham sandwich. That is to say, anyone can be accused of anything. It's another thing to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. After a lengthy discussion with the district attorney, I decided they have all the pictures and physical evidence they need. I send a letter to Southwest Forensic Center. In the matter of Mr. Philip Brinkman, when I order a body to be released, it includes the whole body, which includes arms, legs, and head. Except for tissue or fluid samples needing for further investigation, the total body should be released for interment. Also sent a copy to Dexter, Maine. With this order, the rest of Mr. Brinkman was headed to Maine.